Welcome to Devotions from Israel, a 5-minute word of encouragement. Today's devotion comes from Matthew chapter 13. Our devotion today takes us somewhere to the western shoreline of the Sea of Galilee. Now, this very well could be the shoreline off of Capernaum, one of 15 harbors around the entire lake called the Sea of Galilee, a freshwater lake, incidentally. But we know that Jesus used parables. In fact, the Hebrew for parables is mashalim, or mashal, singular form. Now, Jesus was not unique in the use of parables. Sometimes that may surprise people when I say that, but every teaching rabbi had his own set of parables. And of course, as we read Jesus' parables, we know that oftentimes he would sort of tweak the ending for sort of a shock and awe ending for those who were listening to him share that teaching. But he did teach about the kingdom in parables. In fact, Matthew 13 and 14 record some of these mashalim, or parables, about the kingdom of heaven. But as Jesus got into a boat on this one day, probably for acoustical purposes, his voice would have carried back to the shoreline where people were gathered to listen to him. But this is the parable that we read from Matthew 13. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while the people stood on the shoreline. Then he told them many things in mashalim, parables, saying, A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. Now, after Jesus shared this parable, he would go on to interpret this parable. But I think the intent of Jesus sharing this parable was to point us to the importance of our hearts being like good soil. When the seed of God's salvation falls on our hearts, when it comes our way, when we listen to the Word of God and listen to the message of salvation, I hope and pray that our hearts receive it as if it is like seed falling on good soil. Because when adversity comes, when challenges come in life, when doubt even comes, what holds us firm and steady in our relationship with God through Christ is knowing that the seed of salvation that He has sown in our lives has indeed taken root. And it is what keeps us standing firm. So look for ways to stand firm today in your relationship with God and celebrate the seed that has fallen your way. And with a warm and receptive heart, keep on receiving it, and may your life produce fruit for the kingdom. Be encouraged today. Until next time. Shalom.